I signed the lease on a rainy Tuesday in late October. It was my first apartment on my own, no roommates, no shared bathrooms, no parents hovering around. Just me, a small studio tucked on the third floor of a brick building on the oldest side of town. It wasn't much: peeling paint, creaky floors, that faint smell of someone else's cooking clinging to the hallways, but it was mine. And after years of dorm rooms and living with strangers, that felt like a luxury. The landlord, a guy named Keith in his 50s with a smoker's rasp and a clipboard always under one arm, was friendly enough. A little jumpy, maybe, but I chalked that up to stress. He handed me the keys, gave me a rush tour of the building, mostly just rules and where to put the trash, and left me standing alone in the dim entryway of my new home. There was a window near the ceiling that didn't open, just a foggy square of glass set high above the kitchenette. The walls were that dull off-white color, probably 100 coats deep by now. One closet, one tiny bathroom, and a long vent running the length of the ceiling above the main living space. Everything buzzed faintly with that low, electric hum you only notice when it's otherwise dead quiet. That first night, I barely unpacked. I rolled out a mattress on the floor, ordered cheap Chinese, and collapsed under a pile of unfolded clothes. My phone buzzed now and then, friends asking how it was going, my mom offering to bring over a spare lamp, but I let most of it go to voicemail. I was exhausted. Excited. A little anxious. Around midnight I heard it for the first time. It was a soft thud. Then a dragging sound, faint, but there. Coming from above. Now, the apartment was on the top floor, so my first thought was raccoons or something. Old building, flat roof, probably easy access for animals. Still, it got my attention. I paused my show, sat up, and waited. Nothing. Just the wind outside, tapping something against the fire escape. I told myself it was nothing. Just the building settling. Maybe a loose pipe in the ceiling. I went back to sleep. But the next night, it happened again. This time it was different, short, shuffling sounds, followed by what I can only describe as a long exhale. Like someone sighing. But not from next door or above, it felt close. Like it was directly above the ceiling vent. I got up, walked around barefoot in the dark, and stood under the vent for a minute, listening. Silence. Just the hum of the fridge and the occasional creak of the walls. I laughed it off. Texted a friend something like, "Already haunted LOL," and went back to bed. The thing is, it kept happening. Not every night, but often enough. The sounds varied, sometimes soft tapping, sometimes dragging, once what honestly sounded like whispering. Faint. Too faint to make out. After about a week, I stopped mentioning it to anyone. It just felt weird to keep bringing it up, like I was looking for attention or trying to make something out of nothing. But I started sleeping with earbuds in. Just low white noise, enough to drown it out. It helped. For a while anyway. But then, the smell started. And that changed everything. It started as a whiff, barely noticeable. Like something faintly sour, hanging in the air when I came home from work one evening. I assumed it was the trash. I'd been lazy about taking it out, and I'd left some takeout containers in there longer than I should have. No big deal. I tied up the bag, sprayed some air freshener around, cracked the one window that actually opened, and forgot about it. But the next day, it was worse. It hit me the second I stepped inside, thicker now. Not garbage. It was heavier. Almost metallic. The kind of smell that makes the back of your throat tighten a little. Like meat that's gone off, or a dead animal left somewhere too long. I checked the fridge. Clean. I scoured the trash can, even pulled it into the hallway and hosed it out. Nothing. I cleaned under the sink. Took out the recycling. Lit a candle. Sprayed so much Febreze it made my eyes sting. But the smell lingered. And weirdest of all, it didn't seem to come from anywhere specific. It wasn't stronger in the bathroom, or the closet, or the kitchenette. If anything, it seemed to hang in the air itself, especially in the middle of the room, just beneath the ceiling. Right under the vent. I didn't notice that connection at first. But over the next few days, I kept catching myself looking up. The vent ran the length of the room, maybe 8 inches wide, covered by a dusty metal grate. It didn't seem to be blowing air, hot or cold. In fact, I realized I'd never actually heard the HVAC kick on at all. It was just there. A dark line across the ceiling, too high for me to reach without standing on a chair. I tried not to obsess over it. I told myself old buildings get weird smells all the time. Mold, mildew, rodents. Maybe a dead pigeon in the wall for all I knew. But then, one night, I noticed something new. I'd just gotten home from a late shift and was microwaving leftovers when I saw something on the floor near the kitchenette. A small shape. I figured I'd dropped something, maybe a magnet from the fridge or a piece of plastic. But when I picked it up, my stomach turned. It was a tooth. Human, by the look of it. Yellowed, cracked down the center, with a jagged root still attached. No blood, just old. Dry. Like it had been out of a mouth for a long time. I froze. There was no reason for it to be there. I wasn't carrying anything. I hadn't had anyone over. I hadn't bought any weird decor or thrift shop trinkets that might have included a fake tooth or something. I just stood there, holding it, staring up at the vent without even meaning to. That night, the sounds came back louder. Shuffling. A thud. Something hard scraping across metal. I couldn't take it anymore. The next morning, I called the landlord. I called Keith just after 9 a.m., figuring he'd be at the building or on his rounds. He didn't pick up, so I left a message, something polite, maybe too polite, considering the circumstances. Hey, it's me from 3C. Just wondering if you could check the vent system? I think something might be stuck in there, and there's kind of a strong odor coming through. Might be a dead animal or something? Thanks. No response. That whole day at work, I couldn't focus. Every time I stopped moving, my mind wandered back to that damn tooth, sitting in a plastic bag in the drawer next to my bed. I hadn't thrown it out yet. I didn't know why. It just felt wrong to do that. I got home around 6 and was halfway up the stairs when I heard a door slam on the floor above mine. Which didn't make sense. I lived on the top floor. I paused, one hand on the railing, listening. There was silence for a beat, long enough to start doubting myself, then a sharp, short knock. 3 taps. Rapid. Not on a door, though. On something metal. It echoed slightly, like it was coming from inside the ceiling. I climbed the last few stairs slowly. The hallway was quiet, the air stale like always. My door was closed, undisturbed. I unlocked it and stepped inside. And stopped. Something was off. I didn't know what at first. Everything looked normal. But the smell, it was stronger. More concentrated. It clung to my clothes instantly. And the air felt humid. Like someone had just taken a hot shower and left the door open. I stood there for a few minutes, not moving, just listening. Nothing. I set my bag down, grabbed the broom, and dragged a chair under the vent. I'd never actually looked inside it before, not really. But now I had to. Standing on the chair, I pried the grate loose with the end of the broom handle. It popped out easier than I expected, clattering to the floor. A gust of warm air hit my face. Stale. Sour. I gagged. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam barely pierced the blackness inside. I leaned up closer, squinting. At first, all I saw was dust. Cobwebs. A few pieces of lint or insulation clumped near the edge. Then I saw the ribbon. It was tucked just inside the vent, red, frayed on one end, like it had been torn from a gift or a child's dress. I reached up and tugged it out. Something was tied to it. It was a small, fabric doll. No eyes. No mouth. Just a dirty, hand-sewn body with mismatched arms. Old. The kind of thing a kid might have made in camp or a hospital. It was stiff with grime, and something about it made me feel deeply uncomfortable. Like I was touching something private, something I wasn't meant to see. I dropped it on the table and stood back. This wasn't just a bad smell anymore. Something was seriously wrong. Keith finally called me back that evening. His voice was rushed, like he was distracted. Hey, yeah? 3C, right? You said something's in the vent? Yeah, I said. The smell's been getting worse for days. And I found something up there. Not just trash, like stuff that shouldn't be there. He was quiet for a moment. What kind of stuff? I hesitated. A tooth. And a doll. Tied to a ribbon. That got his attention. I heard something in his voice shift, tighten. I'll come by tomorrow. First thing. Don't open anything else, all right? Don't go poking around in there. Why? I asked. Another pause. Sometimes old tenants leave things behind. Gets lodged in the ductwork. I'll check it out. But the vent doesn't go anywhere. It's not connected to any ducts. I think it's just open space above the ceiling. He didn't answer for several seconds. Then, finally, just don't mess with it. Please. And then he hung up. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of the sounds. Not even because of the smell. But because just before midnight, when I turned off the lights and laid down in bed, I glanced up at the vent one more time. And I saw the faintest reflection of light. 2 small, glassy glints. Like the eyes of someone watching from the darkness above. I didn't move. I laid there, frozen under the thin blanket, eyes locked on that vent. The glints were faint, so faint I started to wonder if I'd imagined them. But they didn't go away. They stayed perfectly still. Unblinking. I tried to convince myself it was just something reflecting the light from outside. Maybe my phone screen had caught the metal edge. Maybe it was dust or a bug or... The eyes blinked. Just once. A slow, deliberate movement. And then they were gone. I sat up so fast I knocked over a glass of water on the nightstand. My heart was hammering so loudly I could hear it in my ears. I turned on every light in the apartment. The vent looked empty again, just a black strip along the ceiling. I knew I should have called someone. The cops, a friend, anyone. But what would I say? That I saw eyes in a vent? That someone was living in the ceiling? I didn't even believe it myself. I stayed up the rest of the night. I sat at the small kitchen table with a cup of cold coffee, eyes locked on the ceiling. Nothing else moved. By sunrise I'd half convinced myself that it was a hallucination brought on by exhaustion. Then Keith showed up. He knocked once, sharp and fast, like he didn't want to be in the hallway too long. I opened the door and found him already sweating, even though it was barely 50 degrees out. He was holding a toolbox and something that looked like a small crowbar. "Where's the vent?" he asked, brushing past me. I pointed. He stared up at it for a few seconds, then asked, "Did you mess with it again?" "No. I told you what I saw." Keith didn't respond. He climbed onto the chair and shined a flashlight inside. I watched his face. He didn't look surprised. He looked tense. Like he knew what he was going to find. "Have you ever had this place inspected?" I asked quietly. He didn't answer right away. Then, finally, "There's crawl space above these units. Not supposed to be, but it's there. Old building design. There's maybe 2 feet between your ceiling and the real floor above. Is that where the smell's coming from?" He climbed down and set his flashlight on the table. "Could be. Rodents. A raccoon. I'll have someone come look at it. I saw eyes up there last night." Keith froze. Just for a second. But it was enough. "Eyes," I repeated. "Watching me." He rubbed his face with one hand. His fingers were trembling. "Listen, you said you found a tooth and a doll, right?" "Yeah. Do you still have them?" I nodded. Wordlessly walked to the drawer and pulled out the plastic bag. He took it carefully, looked inside, and sighed. "I think someone might have been squatting," he said. "In the vent?" "In the ceiling," he clarified. "It's happened before." That stopped me cold. "Wait, before? When?" He shook his head. Years ago. Someone broke in through the roof access. Made a nest up there. We thought we cleared it. But maybe they found a way back in. A nest? He nodded slowly. Clothes, garbage, food wrappers, even some bones. They were hiding up there, moving between units. Only came down when people were out. Jesus Christ. Keith looked around nervously. Don't tell the other tenants, all right? This isn't something I want spreading. I'll take care of it. But you should probably crash somewhere else for a few days. I didn't argue. I packed a bag and left within the hour, heading to my friend Erin's place across town. I didn't tell her much, just said something was wrong with the apartment, and I needed a place to stay. She was cool about it. Gave me a spare blanket and a futon. I stayed up late again, scrolling through articles on my phone. I looked up crawlspace squatters. Ceiling intruders. Secret tenants. I wish I hadn't. There were stories. Real ones. People finding out someone had been living above them for weeks or months without their knowledge. Hiding in attics, between walls. Watching. Listening. Sometimes stealing food. Sometimes just staying quiet. But sometimes it got worse. Sometimes they didn't stay quiet. I didn't sleep much at Erin's. Her futon was fine, her apartment was quiet, and she didn't ask too many questions, but my mind wouldn't shut up. Every creak in the walls made me think of the vent. Every shadow looked like a face. The second night I was there, I woke up around 3 a.m. with a jolt. No noise, no nightmare. Just that same pulse of dread, like something was off somewhere far away, and my body knew it before my mind did. I stared at the ceiling in the dark for a long time, thinking about Keith. The way his voice tightened when I mentioned the doll. The word nest. The fact that he didn't seem shocked, only inconvenienced. It didn't sit right. Around mid-morning the next day, he texted me. Check the vent. Nothing up there now. Probably some leftover trash from before. Cleaned it out. Should be good to come back. That was it. No apology. No offer of help. Just back to normal. But normal felt like a joke now. I waited until that evening to go back, just before sunset. Erin offered to come with me, but I said no. I didn't want someone else in that space. Not yet. When I stepped into the apartment, the first thing I noticed was the silence. It wasn't just quiet, it was still. Like everything had paused. The air smelled faintly of bleach. The vent grate had been reattached, cleaner now. The furniture looked untouched, my clothes exactly where I left them. But there was something different in the air. Heavier. I walked slowly to the table and noticed something I hadn't seen before. Near the edge, almost out of sight, was a small, rust-colored smear. Not large, about the size of a thumbprint. Dried. I stared at it, then grabbed a paper towel and wiped it clean. The rest of the night was uneventful. I didn't hear anything. Didn't see anything. I should have felt better. Relieved. But that feeling never came. Instead, I kept thinking about the way Keith said someone might have been squatting. Not something. Not an animal. Someone. I woke up the next morning with a sore throat and a weird metallic taste in my mouth. Probably from the bleach fumes, I figured. But when I looked in the mirror, I noticed something else. A scratch on my shoulder. Not deep. Just a thin red line, like a nail or wire had grazed me in my sleep. I don't remember doing it. I don't remember anything. I hadn't rolled off the mattress or knocked into anything. It didn't hurt. But it felt wrong. I stood there staring at it, and for the first time, I asked myself a question I hadn't dared think about until that moment. What if they never left? What if whoever had been living up there had just gotten better at hiding? I had to know. That afternoon, I went to the hardware store and bought a cheap inspection camera, one of those snake-like things you can thread into walls or behind appliances. It was meant for plumbing or HVAC work, but it had a little LED light and connected to your phone via Wi-Fi. I brought it home, climbed up on the chair again, and removed the vent grate. The air up there was cooler now. Still. No smell, no obvious sign of anything. I slid the camera in slowly. On my phone screen, I watched as the camera crawled forward through the tight, dusty space. Wires, insulation, wooden beams. Nothing unusual for the first few feet. Then the light caught something in the corner of the frame. I froze. It was a piece of fabric. Dark gray. Folded. I inched the camera closer. It was a blanket, creased and dirty. And next to it, stacked in a shallow indentation between the beams, were objects. Cans. A spoon. A crumpled food wrapper. What looked like a paperback novel, soaked and rotting. And something else. Something small and round. I adjusted the angle. It was a Polaroid photo. Face down. I turned the camera tip and nudged it gently. The photo flipped over. And I saw myself. Sleeping. In bed. Curled on my side, face half covered by a pillow. The image was grainy, but unmistakable. It was me. Taken from above. Taken from inside the vent. I dropped the phone. The inspection camera cable jerked loose, and the image disappeared, but it didn't matter. My hands were already shaking. I stared at the floor, trying to breathe. Someone had taken a picture of me while I slept. Not from the hallway. Not through the window. From inside my apartment. From the ceiling. I should have run. Should have packed a bag and walked out that minute and never come back. But I didn't. I just stood there, paralyzed, heart pounding so loud I could barely hear anything else. I kept looking up at the vent. Trying to imagine a person, a real human being, laying in that crawl space, waiting, watching, living. I called Keith. Voicemail. Called again. Straight to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. What was I supposed to say? That I found a Polaroid of myself taken by some feral ceiling tenant? That the squatter he supposedly cleared out was still there? No. I needed more. Proof. Evidence. I pulled the chair to the center of the room and climbed up again. Took a flashlight this time and pushed my head into the vent opening, just enough to see with my own eyes. The space was tight. About 2 feet high. A flat expanse of wooden beams and insulation stretching across the top of my unit. Not enough room to stand, but enough to move. Enough to crawl. I scanned the beam where I'd seen the objects on the camera. The blanket. The cans. The photo. Gone. Everything was gone. I pulled back and climbed down, heart still hammering. Maybe they knew I'd used the camera. Maybe they'd been watching me while I did it. Listening. Waiting. And the second I left, they cleared it out. I turned in circles in the apartment, not knowing what to do. I checked the closet. The cabinets. The bathroom. Everything felt exposed, like someone had touched every object in the room. Rearranged things slightly. Shifted them by inches just to unsettle me. And it worked. That night I locked the front door, then shoved a chair under the knob. It wouldn't stop anyone determined, but it was something. I turned off every light except the one by my bed, then pulled the blanket up to my chest and just waited. I didn't sleep. Around 2 a.m. I heard something. A faint creak above the ceiling. Followed by a soft, drawn-out scrape. It didn't sound like movement across the beams. It sounded like movement between them. Like something being dragged downward, through the wall, slipping into a hollow cavity between drywall and wood. I held my breath. Another creak. Then silence. I don't remember falling asleep, but at some point I did. When I woke up, it was just after dawn. The light through the window was pale and cold. The chair was still under the door. Nothing had moved. But when I sat up, I saw something waiting on the kitchen counter. Another Polaroid. This one wasn't of me sleeping. It was of me, from the night before. Standing on the chair. Using the inspection camera. The photo was placed neatly on the counter, like a gift. A warning. I backed away slowly, heart pounding. That was it. I was done. I stuffed clothes into a bag, grabbed my keys, and left without looking back. I went straight to the police. I didn't go to the local station, I drove 2 towns over. I don't know why. Some irrational instinct told me that getting distance would make someone take it more seriously. That if I could just talk to an officer who hadn't met Keith, who didn't know the building, they might listen. I sat in the lobby for about 40 minutes, turning the Polaroid over and over in my pocket. I didn't want to show it. I didn't want to have it. But it felt like the only thing anchoring me to the reality that this was really happening. Eventually, a young cop named Becker took me into a back room with thin beige walls and a flickering fluorescent light. He had a kind face, looked maybe my age, maybe a little younger. I started with the basics, weird noises, the smell, the vent. He listened politely. But I could see it in his eyes, there was a shift when I said the word. Eyes. When I said I saw someone watching me from the vent, his posture changed slightly. Just enough. Then I mentioned the Polaroids. I pulled out both, the one of me sleeping, the one of me standing on the chair. Becker took them carefully, and suddenly he wasn't smiling anymore. "You're sure no one else lives in that apartment?" he asked. I nodded. "I live alone." He asked if I had a boyfriend, girlfriend, friends with keys, anyone who might be playing a sick joke. "No," I said. "No one even knows where I live, besides one friend. And the landlord." He took notes, asked a few more questions, then excused himself to talk to someone. I sat in that little room for another 20 minutes, watching the dust collect in the corners, imagining the crawl space above my ceiling like a second skin on my apartment. Becker came back with another officer, a woman in her 40s, sharper around the edges. She introduced herself as Detective Lawrence. She didn't waste time. "We're going to need to see the apartment," she said. "Can you take us there now?" So I did. They followed me back in an unmarked car, Becker riding with me. I didn't talk much. Just kept gripping the wheel tighter every time I glanced in the rear view, and imagined something else sitting behind me in the back seat. When we got to the building, I noticed Keith's car wasn't in the lot. We went up the stairs. I unlocked the door. They stepped in first. They moved through the apartment quickly, Becker taking photos, Lawrence tapping walls with her knuckles, checking window locks. I pointed out the vent. Showed them where I found the first photo. Explained how I used the inspection camera. Becker climbed up and looked inside. After a few minutes he said, "There's definitely space up here. But I'm not seeing anything obvious. Can you check further back?" I asked. There was a whole setup. A blanket. Trash. Someone cleared it out. Lawrence frowned. "You said your landlord came in and checked it, right?" "Yeah." "Did you give him permission to enter?" I blinked. "I mean, I wasn't here, but I told him what I found. Did you sign anything? A work order? A notice?" "No." She nodded slightly but didn't say anything more. They didn't find much. No fingerprints on the Polaroids. No camera or holes in the ceiling. Just an old vent and a frightened tenant with a story that sounded too much like an urban legend to make sense. But Lawrence didn't laugh. She didn't roll her eyes. In fact, she said something before they left that stuck with me. "Sometimes these old buildings have spaces no one wants to claim. Rooms between rooms. Pockets behind walls. Places you can't see without tearing the whole thing apart." I asked what I was supposed to do. She glanced around. "If it were me, I'd get out. Today." And just like that, they were gone. I stood alone in that room again, holding 2 Polaroids in my shaking hand. I wanted to leave. I tried to leave. But there was one more thing I had to check first. Something Keith never explained. Something I hadn't noticed until I looked at the layout of the building a little more closely. There was no unit above mine. I lived on the top floor. But from the outside, if you looked at the fire escape, counted the windows, there was a space above my apartment. One extra, narrow window. Too small for a person to stand behind. I'd seen it a dozen times, assumed it belonged to an attic or storage space. But it didn't. It wasn't connected to anything. It was just there. Unlabeled. Unclaimed. And when I checked the building's old floor plan online later that night, I found something that made my skin crawl. The space above my ceiling wasn't a crawl space. It was a room. I couldn't stop staring at the blueprint. It was scanned from some city archive, dated 1966. Faded and uneven, but clear enough. My Unit 3C was marked plainly. Above it, the drawing showed what looked like another room, longer than mine, narrower. No doors. No stairs leading up. Just a simple rectangle marked with 2 letters scrawled in faint pencil. UR. I didn't know what it meant. There was no mention of it in the leasing paperwork. No button for a 4th floor in the building's elevator. No mention from Keith. And when I walked the hallway that night, pacing quietly so no one heard me, I counted the doors again. There were only 3 on my floor. A, B, and C. But if there was a room above me, an unnumbered room, how did someone get in? I couldn't let it go. I barely slept. The next day, I left work early and came back to the building in daylight, when things felt less threatening, less haunted. I paced the back alley, craning my neck to look up at that narrow window. It was covered in grime and mesh. Too small to climb through. But it was there. Something was up there. Someone. I went to the basement next. The building had a small maintenance area tucked past the laundry room, mostly full of rusted shelves, old boxes, and paint cans. But near the back was a low, metal door I'd never noticed before. Unmarked. Padlocked. I tried the key from my apartment, knowing it wouldn't work. It didn't. But when I stepped back, I noticed something in the dust on the floor. Footprints. Not boots or sneakers. Bare feet. Long, narrow toes. The kind that leave clear imprints when someone walks slowly, deliberately. They led to the door. And then, nothing. I backed out. Closed the laundry room door behind me and sat on the stairs for a while, trying not to throw up. That night I didn't go home. I went back to Erin's. She opened the door and just looked at me for a long second before saying, "You look like you've been digging up bones." I almost laughed. I told her more this time. Not everything. But enough. The noises. The smell. The photos. The room that isn't supposed to exist. I could tell she didn't know whether to believe me, but she listened, and that meant everything. "I mean, is it possible someone's been living up there for years?" she asked. I nodded. "Yeah. And I think Keith knows." That part made her sit forward. "Why would he cover that up?" "I don't know. But I had a theory. A quiet one. One I hadn't said out loud yet. Maybe it was someone he knew. Maybe someone who was supposed to be gone but never left. Someone who was easier to ignore than remove. Someone who had grown into the walls like rot. That night, I got a text from an unknown number. No words. Just a photo. A blurry, close-up shot of my face. I was brushing my teeth. Wearing the same shirt I had on right then. I dropped my phone. Almost screamed. Erin ran into the room asking what happened, but I couldn't even explain. I just shoved the phone at her, and when she saw the picture, her whole body tensed. "Is that from right now?" I nodded. She locked every door and window in her apartment. Slept with a bat next to the bed. I didn't sleep at all. Because the longer I stared at the photo, the more I realized it wasn't taken from outside. It wasn't through a window. The angle was wrong. It had been taken from behind the bathroom mirror. The next morning, I called in sick. I couldn't fake normal anymore. Couldn't smile at coworkers or pretend to be interested in whatever meeting I had scheduled. My world had narrowed into one point, the space between my ceiling and the thing, or person, that lived in it. I kept thinking about the blueprint. That little box above my apartment. UR. Unregistered room? Utility room? Unknown room? No matter what it stood for, one thing was clear. It was never meant to be found. Around noon, I got another text. This one wasn't a photo. It was an address. Just an intersection, barely 3 blocks from my building. The corner of Ash and Riven. I don't know why I went. Curiosity, maybe? Or desperation? Or that slow, cold magnetism you feel when you're circling something awful and already know it's going to pull you in. The intersection led to a shuttered building. An old brick structure with blackout windows and a rusted sign above the door that read, St. Olen's, Archives/Records. It was half collapsed in the back. Probably condemned. But the front door had been jimmied open, just enough for someone to squeeze through. So I did. Inside, the air was thick with dust and mold. Shelves sagged under the weight of rotting folders. I used my phone flashlight, waving it slowly over stacks of records, file drawers left ajar, broken chairs. It looked abandoned for decades. But someone had been here recently. There was a path in the dust, clear footprints, weaving through the wreckage. I followed them to the back, past a warped door with a broken lock. Beyond it was a narrow stairwell leading down. Cold air drifted up from below, smelling faintly of iron and mildew. I hesitated. Then went down. The stairs creaked under me, the light on my phone flickering as I moved. The basement was low-ceilinged and damp, walls lined with more filing cabinets and stacks of water-damaged boxes. I walked slowly, scanning each one. Then I saw it. A cardboard box, half collapsed, with my building's address scrawled across it in fading Sharpie. No apartment number. Just the street and name, Marling House. I opened it. Inside were a dozen manila folders. I pulled one out and opened it. Tenant records. Old ones? Photos. Names. Dates. Some going back as far as 1974. Most were standard, rent payments, maintenance requests. But a few were flagged in red pen. One had a yellowing photograph of a teenage boy with hollow eyes and a long, pale face. The name listed beneath it was R. Galen. The notes were short. Disciplinary record. History of violence. Eviction attempted, failed. Tenant disappeared. No forwarding address. But the most disturbing part. There were 5 separate entries over the next 20 years, all listing different tenants reporting noises, smells, and missing items, all from the same unit. 3C. Each complaint was labeled as resolved in Keith's handwriting. Keith had been the property manager for over 30 years. I stepped back, blood roaring in my ears. He knew. He had always known. I took photos of everything I could, then climbed out of that basement and ran. Back to Erin's. Locked the door behind me and finally told her everything. The photos. The vent. The hidden room. The records. To her credit, she didn't tell me I was crazy. She just said, "We need to go up there." I blinked. What? We find a way into the crawl space. Into that room. We find him. We film everything. We make it impossible to deny. I wanted to say no. I wanted to forget the whole thing and burn the place down and never hear the word vent again. But something inside me agreed. Because this wasn't just about me anymore. If someone was living up there, if Keith had let it happen, who's to say I was the only one he watched? We went back at dusk. Climbed the fire escape to the roof. Erin carried a flashlight. I carried a crowbar. The hatch to the roof access stairwell was rusted, but it gave. We climbed down into the building's top level, where the insulation was crumbling and the walls felt like they were breathing. There, behind a sheet of plywood and old ducts, was a door. It was old. Steel. No knob, just a sliding bolt, secured with a rusted padlock. I raised the crowbar. The lock popped with a snap like a gunshot. Erin pulled the door open, and we stepped into the room above my apartment. The room without a number. The room was smaller than I imagined. No windows, no lights. Just plywood walls and the low, sloped ceiling of a building that never planned for people to live this high. The air was so stale it felt wet. Erin gagged behind me. I stepped in first. The floor was covered in old carpet, stained so badly it was almost black. In one corner, under a makeshift shelf of nailed-together planks, was a nest of blankets and torn clothing. Candy wrappers. Empty cans. Dozens of them, stacked neatly like some kind of offering. And in the far wall, there was a hole. Not large, just big enough for a thin person to slip through. It led directly into the ceiling above my apartment. A cold breeze drifted through it, faint and sour. Aaron whispered, "Is anyone in here?" No answer. We scanned the room with our lights. That's when we saw the photos. They were taped to the walls, some yellowed and curling, others freshly printed. All Polaroids. All of me. Sleeping. Eating. Brushing my hair. Talking on the phone. There were dozens. Some from angles I couldn't comprehend, directly overhead, or eye level from the back of my closet. But some were older. Different faces. Different tenants. Other women. Men. All of them in that same apartment. Some sleeping. Some crying. One photo showed a woman on the phone, tears streaking her face. Another showed a man holding a frying pan in defense, staring up at the ceiling. None of them were smiling. All of them looked afraid. There was a notebook tucked beside the pile of photos. I picked it up. Pages and pages of tight, frantic handwriting, spilled out in black ink, some of it smeared by water or worse. I flipped through. It wasn't a diary. Not really. It was documentation. Times. Names. Movements. Schedules. Girl leaves apartment 7:12 a.m. She eats cereal again. Red box. Likes quiet music. She cried for 13 minutes. I washed. The pages went on and on. Years of it. Erin said nothing. She just kept backing toward the door. Then I saw the hatch. In the far corner of the room, nearly flush with the floor, was a square of plywood with a small metal ring screwed into it. Like a cellar door. No hinges. Just a simple handle. I stared at it. That's when we heard the breath. Not behind us. Beneath us. Slow. Raspy. Wet. I dropped the notebook. Erin whispered, "We should go." But I was already moving, backpedaling, yanking her arm, dragging us toward the door. I didn't want to see what was under that hatch. I didn't need to. Whoever had been watching me wasn't just living in the ceiling. They were sleeping under the floorboards. Feeding through the walls. Slipping through the thin skin of my apartment when I was too tired to notice. We left the door open. I didn't care. We climbed back onto the roof, down the fire escape, onto the street. We didn't stop until we were blocks away, bent over on the curb, breathless. I moved out that week. Didn't go back. Not even to pack. Erin helped me file the report. The police went back with a warrant. They never told me what they found. The official story was unauthorized access to a maintenance space. Nothing about the photos. Nothing about the hatch. Nothing about the notebook. Keith disappeared. Vanished the day after the cops went in. His office was cleared out. No forwarding address. No resignation. Just gone. I've tried to let it go. I have a new place now. I keep all the vents sealed. Sleep with earplugs. Triple lock every door. But sometimes, on quiet nights, I still dream of that little room. Not the photos. Not the breath. The eyes. Glassy, quiet, watching. Just above the ceiling. Waiting for me to forget.